Is your small business growing? That's the question we address right here on the Grow Your Biz Show. It's where we interview strategic entrepreneurs who inform and inspire you on your solopreneur or small company journey. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Grow Your Biz Show. Welcome to this episode of the Grow Your Biz Show. I'm your host, Paul Madsen, founder of growmedia.com. Our social media videos tell and sell the story of your book or your business. And I am so excited today about today's program because of our guests. With us in studio, we have Kim and Frank Spillers. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for being here, making the big drive.
We appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. Kim and Frank are the co-founders of the Rural Community Solutions based in Atlantic, Iowa, and they are here to tell us all about the great things that they do. Kim, Frank, I'm just going to jump right on in.
Okay.
Tell us, Kim, what business are you in?
We're in the business of designing family-friendly, youth-centered places for rural communities that thrive.
Family-centered.
No, family-friendly.
Family-friendly.
Youth-centered.
Youth-centered.
Places that thrive.
Places that thrive.
For rural communities.
Rural communities.
Yes.
Time out.
Yes.
Because I have spent a lot of time in my life in rural communities. And Frank, my hometown, 900 people, plywood on the windows of Main Street. You've seen that before. Mm-hmm. How can you make rural communities thrive, Frank? This doesn't make any sense.
Well, we don't make that, but we give the opportunity for communities to make the decision themselves. Some communities don't want to grow. Mm-hmm. Some communities do. It is by choice.
They don't want to grow up. Is that what you're saying?
No, they don't want to grow. They're happy the way it is.
They're stuck in adolescence.
Yes, they really grieve more than anything. We just spent a week in a county last week in another state, and a lot of what we heard was pining away for what used to be.
Well,
There's a lot of grief that Main Street isn't the same as it was in the 50s and 60s. It's not crowded. It's not busy. It's not.
Right.
It's not the same community.
It's a different world.
And it is.
Yeah. Well, Frank, I understand that your organization has 4 pillars that it uses to approach helping these communities get from what Kim just described to where they need to be. Tell us about a couple of those pillars briefly.
Sure. Well, we do use 4 pillars to view and to kind of assess a community. And those 4 pillars are relationships, engagement, entrepreneurs, and collaboration. And relationship is all about words and attitude. What words you use and what attitude do you have about your community. Engagement is all about active listening. Do you actively listen or do you just wait to talk? Entrepreneurs is all about vision, purpose, passion about your community, but also to build an ecosystem that supports entrepreneurship. And collaboration, of course, is all about collaborative leadership. Not about the project being done, but how do we work with people and their talents and their mission and put the people together it's more about how people work together rather than the finished product.
Excellent. Well, those 4 pillars sound to me like what a lot of towns need to make the transition from what they are to where they need to be. Rural Community Solutions, Kim and Frank Spillers, thanks for joining us for this segment of the Grow Your Biz Show. And welcome back to this segment of the Grow Your Biz Show. I'm Paul Madsen from growmedia.com. With me today are Kim and Frank Spillers of Rural Community Solutions. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You bet. Hey, in a previous segment, we were talking about the 4 pillars of your business, how you folks help rural communities to thrive. Kim, tell us, one of those pillars is relationships.
Yes.
Tell us what that means.
Relationships is about our words. Why our words matter. In rural communities, we kind of have a tendency, perhaps, to be stuck in the past, and we use words when that vision, that experience that we've had changes. We can talk in more negative terms than in positive terms about the attributes a community has, rather that are going to be guiding into a different kind of a future. So we really encourage people to think about the words that they use, because they really do matter to people who are passing through, to people who live in the community, and whether or not they are guided by positivity or whether or not they're guided by, gosh, I wish it used to be, the way it was.
Well, I when you're talking, I was thinking about how oftentimes I've heard that phrase, not only in rural communities, but the phrase, well, that's not how we used to do it.
Oh, yeah.
You hear that
All
all week long, don't you?
Yes, we do.
We've always done it this way.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Frank, tell us a little bit more about relationships.
Well, relationships also is about attitude, and it's how do we talk about our community. And a lot of times we will stop for gas in a community, and we'll go up to the convenience store, and we'll just visit with the clerk. What's it like to live in this community? And it depends on if the community has done a good job on building relationships, then that clerk will say, this community is great, and I really like it here, I've raised my kids here. However, on the upside, they say, well, I can't wait to get out of here, and I'm just trying to get out of here. And that really gives a good tone, because that's frontline people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they're talking to the tourists and talking to the people coming
Yes.
through, and have a body language or an attitude about what their community. Most people probably don't ask the gas clerk, what is the question, the probing questions that you folks do. Kim, other examples of relationship work in communities that you have and you've done and what they need?
Just to follow up on what Frank
Oh,
said,
okay.
is we have encountered several people. The most striking one that comes to mind is we were in a western state, and on our way to do a keynote, and we stopped for gas and asked the lady what it was like to live here, and her eyes just got huge. No one had ever asked her that before, and she almost started crying and
Wow.
said, I can't wait to get out of here.
Wow.
And I was distressed. It hurt my heart.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what?
Yeah.
What happened? And turns out she was a victim of Katrina, the hurricane, and she relocated most of the way across the country.
Wow.
She expected it only to be a couple, 2-3 months or years, and here it was 10 years later, and she felt stuck. And when you give that, it's common that people who want to do new businesses, who are looking for relocating either their family or a business, they'll ask those kinds of questions because they want to know what the local people think.
Right.
And when you get that kind of response, then you're kind of like, I'm not sure whether or not this is a good place. So that's why we really emphasize that training those frontline people that are in your community are a really important part
Sure.
of your economic development.
Sure. Well, Frank, do you think that this convenience store employee, for instance, felt welcomed at that community, felt accepted in there? I mean, tell us more about what you think her relationships were in that community.
Well, I don't know, but what we say is happiness is a choice. And you can either be happy where you're at or not.
Or feel a victim of something.
Yeah. And so we really look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
In a traditional economic development, they look at the very base of basics, food, clothing, shelter, that type of thing. And the second level is the economy, and that's where do you feel safe and do you have a job? Do you have a way of making a living? Mm-hmm. But the third is a sense of belonging, and that's where we focus on as that sense of belonging. And so we do say, happiness is a choice, and we even have a graphic that's, are you happy? When you wake up in the morning, you have a question to ask. Are you happy?
Yep.
And if the answer is yes, the answer and the result of that is keep doing what you're doing, right?
Okay,
Well,
that makes sense.
Okay, wake up in the morning, are you happy? No. The next question is, do you want to be happy? If the answer is yes, then you have to change something. You have to change something, not expecting the change from somebody else.
The world around you to change, you have to be the one to realize that it's not everybody else's problem, it's my job to fix it.
Right. And so, and then if we all know people like this. You wake up in the morning, you go, am I happy? The answer is no. Do you want to be happy? The answer is no. Right? I mean,
I know people like that.
I know it.
Right? We can all think of somebody.
And we call them, we call them, if you wake up in the morning and the answer is no, and you don't want to be happy, we call them the crap magnets. Because crap attracts crap.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if it's just like some communities have this table in their coffee shops where people go early in the morning and they solve all the world's problems.
Of course, yeah.
Through complaints. And that is kind of what I call the crap table.
Yeah.
It's not craps.
Not gambling.
We're not going like that. It's the crap table, because that's all they talk about.
Right.
And it's really a negative term. And it brings the energy of that community down.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes complete sense. Well, does your organization work with people on those kind of skill sets when a community engages you? Do you help? How do you help avoid the crap table?
Well, part of it is awareness. So what sets us apart as Rural Community Solutions is that we work on a community's culture. And it's not the community, but all of its components also. So in your worship places, in your businesses, in your families, all of those places, they all matter, what words they use and what attitudes they have. So we help a community become aware first what it's like. We have a community assessment.
I bet some companies, sorry to interrupt,
No,
I
that's okay.
bet that a lot of companies aren't even aware of their stinking thinking or whatever, their negative stuff they're sending out in the community. Because why? Well, they've always done it that way. They've always been that way. And they need people like you to come and shake them up.
Well, and it's not that it's bad. It's just that where is it getting you?
Good point.
Number of rural America's communities haven't grown for decades. Where we live, actually, our county hasn't grown for more than 100 years.
Wow.
And with COVID gives us a great opportunity, actually, because there are families who are exiting the metro areas, and they're looking for places in rural America. And that is an absolutely wonderful opportunity for our small towns to welcome new people. And it doesn't have to be by droves. It can be in a school district, in a rural town. 5, 6 families a year is an enormous contribution to a community's vitality and school district. And we have great schools in rural America.
Yeah.
And we have the opportunity perhaps to grow slowly. And that's why we work on the culture, because people are mobile these days. And if they don't feel welcome, then they will probably just pick up and they'll go someplace else and try another town.
Well, like you say, Frank, you mentioned COVID. I mean, remote work now is accepted and possible, and so I could go to live in Ottumwa, Iowa, or Atlantic, Iowa, and in fact, when I was back in Wisconsin over last summer, a couple of my old friends and neighbors, now I'm asking, well, where does he work? What does he do? And several of them lived in this town of 900 people and worked for major corporations.
Yes.
And it's all electronic and it's wonderful. Do you see a lot of that happening more in Iowa, Frank?
Well, not only in Iowa, but across the nation.
Okay.
We work more across the nation than we do in Iowa.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Right now, that's true.
Yeah.
And so people are now choosing where they want to live and bringing their jobs with them.
Right.
Because of remote work, and we still have a lot of work to do with broadband across this country.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still blank spots that where people can't work and students can't learn. I mean, it's really important because students, even the hot spots that the schools would give them when COVID was there. We really need to look at how do we blanket as infrastructure. How do we blanket this country with broadband? Just like we blanketed the country with electricity, now it's broadband. We have to go back to how did we do the rural electrification? Now we have to do the rural broadbandification.
But we really need to give Iowa kudos because Iowa has more mom and pop telephone companies, privately owned businesses than any other state in the country. So if you have remote workers listening to this, we'd really encourage you to check out Iowa because we have connectivity. We have a lot of gig service right to the home, fiber to the home.
And so it is that not just bring your job with you, but it could be the commuter.
Right.
on there, and we'll talk some of that
Yeah,
about the
in the
Gallup
future.
the Gallup information, the Gallup
Okay.
statistics, and
Well,
things
as
like
we
that.
wrap up this section about relationships, your pillar of relationships, I mean, it hadn't occurred to me about the convenience store person being a spokesman for the town. And you help communities move into the mentality of selling themselves, it sounds like. So relationships, last word, what's key about that, Kim?
What's key about relationships?
Yeah,
Relationships matter to everything. If a person feels like they belong, they will want to stay, they will want to engage, they will want to be part of a community and share their talents and assets.
And
Beautiful.
not only for your community, but for your business too. I mean, if we have people that are, the businesses are really struggling for workers. It's the environment.
Right. Well, and I can see relationships as the underpinning of all that. I'm with Kim and Frank Spillers of Rural Community Solutions. They can help your small community to thrive. Thanks for joining us for this segment. And welcome back to this segment of the Grow Your Biz Show. I'm the host, Paul Madsen, and I'm with Kim and Frank Spillers of Rural Community Solutions. Thanks for coming back.
We appreciate it.
Hey, good to see you again. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
We're going to jump right into this segment, and we've talked about the pillars of your organization's philosophy of helping small towns and rural communities to thrive. One of those was relationships. We spoke about that. Next, I'd like to hear about what's next on the list, Kim.
No, the next one is engagement, because community engagement is absolutely critical. Our country was founded on democracy and making decisions together. That's how our country has evolved over the centuries. And when communities give over their ability to make decisions to leaders, to elected officials and things, that's all great. But it's where you get real community engagement and involvement is when you sit down and you talk to each other and you make decisions together about your tough community issues.
Well, that sounds like a tall order, especially when, like we've talked about, people are used to doing things in a certain way. Frank, what's the way to chisel that ice block down?
Well, we start with how do people become who they became?
Oh.
And so
You
we
go deep.
Oh, we
You
go
go
really
deep.
deep. We go into brain development
We go
when
back
we
to
do
pregnancy.
this. Yeah. So in the third trimester, a child's brain starts to connect the neurons.
Wow.
By the time that child is age 3, 80% of the neurons are connected in the brain. This is why early care and education is so important. Is because when you put your public expenditures down towards when the brain is starting to develop, then you get a better worker, you get a better educated individual. There's studies on this. So we have early care and education is an infrastructure issue within a community for economic development. Because if you don't have early care and education, if you don't have daycare, someplace for the kids, you don't have a workforce.
Well, I hearing you talk, I hadn't thought about that. Worker recruitment starts in the womb.
Yeah, it does.
Or
It
when they're
really
born.
does.
I mean, the 0 to 3, and you remind me of when I had little kids, babies. Our general practice physician said, you cannot overstimulate them.
That's
and
right.
so I think that's a message for all the young families, and not for an economic development standpoint, but I never really thought about a good worker starts at age 1 or 0.
Well,
Or 0, because every child learns through their 5 senses. Everyone learns through their 5 senses.
Yes.
Everybody does. But a child with their brain development, and by the time they're age 6, 90% of the brain's
Right about
neurons are
kindergarten.
connected. So you have 0 to 6, 90% of your brain is connected on neurons, but you have no filtering mechanism to say, yes, this is true, no, this isn't true. So it's just like a sponge absorbing the environment, and that's how people become who they become. That's why you wake up in your mid-20s or mid-30s and go, oh my goodness, I've become my mother. It's because you have absorbed that environment.
They have a whole commercial series on the insurance company about how not to become your father.
That's it. Yeah,
I mean, that's such a
Yes.
well-known joke
Oh my
that
gosh, that's
and that commercial series has been playing for a long, long time, and so everybody gets it and everybody's in on it. Well, Kim, how does that 0 to 3, 0 to 6 brain development, how does that translate into community engagement?
Oh,
There's
boy.
a leap for you.
So then we go back to culture, because all of that learning that takes place at home and in schools and in childcare is what forms the child, which is what forms the community. So you get community think. We have a great story where all of our communities were founded, let's just stay here in this country. All of the communities were founded when someone rode across the prairie on the wagon, they jumped off, planted their flag, and said, this is where I want my community to be.
You have Smithville, Bennetville,
Yes, exactly.
Thompsonville, and all the rest.
All the rest,
Yeah.
yes. So that history of, they recruited people back from where they came from. And those people were their friends and their family who had different skills who were needed to build that town.
Sure.
In its capacity at that time, it was mostly to support agriculture, but it was entrepreneurship, and we'll get to that another time. But what happens is that then the way those families were raised, the way those communities were raised, they gained their own identity, and they keep those identities generation after generation after generation, unless new people come in with new ideas, new methods, new ways to do things. So the culture of a community, once you understand what your culture is, then you can go back to kind of like being happy and yes or no. And if you want to make some changes, then that's the opportunity for the community or the family or the organization or business or whatever.
But that's not the way they've done it always. I mean, I think when you're talking, I'm thinking about my hometown, happened to be Wisconsin. The two neighboring communities, here's a big guess as to their heritage. It's West Sweden and West Denmark. This is the name of the town.
Yes.
Now,
Yep,
how do you permeate that culture with a new mentality, Frank?
You know, most of the time,
of engagement. Yes.
Yeah, most of the time it's not changing the culture. It's just making them aware of how they act.
Yep.
And once that people are aware of how they act, and it is their culture, they can improve their actions.
Interesting.
And we have a couple of graphs as we talk about this that when people have a sense of well-being, right, they're formed by their value system, and that sense of well-being then is framed by three elements. It's safety. How safe do you feel in your community? It's choice. How many choices do you have? Or, do people just say, this is it? And the third one is quality of life, as the person defines it. Now, quality of life is as individual as DNA. Everybody has their own perception of quality of life. And so if somebody is really upset at a community, we look at which element of those three, safety, choice, or quality of life, which element of those three does a person think they're being attacked on? And then that we can have. And if it's choice, the less choice a person has in solving an issue or addressing an issue in a community, the more disruptive that issue is.
Well, yeah, I mean, they feel trapped, and somehow you've got to release them from that entrapment. And that's really, I hadn't thought about that choice. You know, and all of us live in the prisons of our own little worlds, don't we? And I suppose it's especially magnified when you're talking about a small community, because the choices may be perceived to be fewer.
Right.
And
That's very true.
isn't it kind of like a mirror, Kim? I mean, these people see themselves in a mirror of this reflection, and how does that interact with engagement from a big picture?
Well, if they bring someone in to help them see that reflection.
You are the mirror.
Yes,
That's
we
where
are.
I'm going
Yes,
with
we
this.
are definitely the mirror. And what I would really like to have happen is Frank to tell the story of what engagement and what that revelation can be for a community. It's a great story because
Go ahead, Frank.
because he did it. It's best coming from him.
Let's hear it.
Well,
you have 2 minutes.
I do. On the inverse of the more disruptive the issue, or the less choice, the more disruptive the issue, the more disruptive the issue, the higher the cost it is to resolve in time, talent, volunteerism, everything
Right.
like
Community
that.
life opportunity.
So I was working with a community, a small community of about 1,200, and one year they had a fire in the forest, and they were a tourism community. Second, and 2 years later, they had a flash flood. They boom right there, and they kind of wiped out their civic infrastructure.
Wow.
They spent 2 years building a golf course, 9-hole golf course.
Wow.
The day they were supposed to tee off and open that, they had a flood. Or the night before they had the flash flood, wiped out half of the holes.
Oh,
I
my
mean,
goodness.
If you're a golfer, you're going, oh, like this, you know. But even if you're not a golfer and a volunteer,
Yeah,
on it.
just what?
And so I was sent out as part of the flood mitigation team. And my role on the flood mitigation is to let's put the community together and plan on how they want to rebuild. How do you want to put back your parks? How do you want to put back the golf course?
Well,
that type of
they've
thing.
invested so much at that point that there was not a choice. I mean, they probably did. No one said, "Oh, well, let's forget all about that." They all
Exactly.
got back on their horse and rode with it. didn't
Well, you
sort
would've
of.
thought so.
You would have thought so.
You would've
yeah,
thought so.
that's-
Okay,
The
what
rest
did
of
they
the
do?
story-
But then we're getting back to culture, and so I had about 300 people in the school auditorium and in the theater, and nobody would talk. I mean, I was trying to pull information of brainstorming of how do we want to build this back. And so after a couple hours of that, I said, okay, guys, I'm coming back in 2 weeks, and we're going to continue this. And so in the 2 weeks that I was not in the community, I went to the state historian of that state, and I said, tell me about this community. And he said, Frank, I know exactly what this community is. And he's a state historian, right?
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, tell me. And he said, 100 years ago. And I said, how long? And he said, 100 years ago, they gave an award to the neighbor that hated their neighbor the most.
Community culture.
Wow.
So here you are on New Year's Eve, right? You're partying with all your friends, you're having a really good time. You wake up on New Year's Day and you go, you know what? I'm going to compete for that award and win it, and I'm going to hate my neighbor more than anybody else can hate their neighbor in this town. So they built a culture of hate. And I don't know, you know, it might have been a Chamber of Commerce that did this, that said, you know, this is going to be just kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
But over time, the culture from grandpa went to mom or dad and went to grandchild.
Yeah.
And so 3 cultures away, they still hated people. And when I went back to the community in 2 weeks, I told them that story, and you could see their faces just kind of relax like this.
Wow.
And people going, I was wondering why I couldn't play with you when I was young, or
Oh, my
Grandpa would
goodness.
never go down your street, or
This is
something
kind
like
of the
that.
Hatfields and McCoys or something
It
like
really
that.
was,
Yes,
but
yes.
they built that culture of hate on there. And after they understood the culture, they moved beyond it. And boy, did we have a brainstorming session to no brainstorming session.
Wow, it's you triggered a release in them.
Exactly.
You gave them permission to not hate, permission to. I wonder if generations even knew about. You
No,
know,
that was the
just
thing.
were
They didn't
taught
know.
this.
Yeah.
They didn't know why they did this.
Kind of like the story with the grandma's ham in the pan. Have you heard
Yes,
that one?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that's exactly
For the
right.
viewers, the grandma had too small a pan for a hen, cut the ends off, and so her daughter always cut the ends off the hen. One of the husbands says, "Why do you cut the ends off the ham?" Well, my mom did that, and her mom did that, and it's like, "Grandma, why did you do that?" Well, the pan was too small.
That's right. It just tastes better with the ends cut off, right?
No, it's not that. So you helped that town cut the ends off their hate, basically.
Well, every town has what are you sweeping under the rug? What are you sweeping under the rug that you're not dealing with? And that's where engagement comes in.
Right.
And so we put people in a circle.
Sure.
We get rid of the tables.
Right.
We put people in a circle, and we just ask them value-laden questions. You know, we just came back from communities working in the county by saying, define your community identity, and they would have the conversation.
Wonderful. If you want your community to have more engagement, to cut the ends off that hate and consider how you can expand your universe, consider Kim and Frank Spillers of Rural Community Solutions. Thanks for joining this segment of the Grow Your Biz Show.